3, 2, 1, liftoff.
Cannabinoid Connect, the nation's most diverse cannabis-related podcast.
All right, we're recording. Livi, again, nice to meet you. I'm really excited that you're on the podcast today because, I mean, first off, your journey is remarkable, like your overall story, and I mean, you're a living testament as to what plant medicine can do, right? Outside of what is kind of traditionally instructed or taught in our current healthcare system. So I think before we get into a lot of different topics, because as I mentioned before, before we started recording, I follow your X posts, and I know that you talk about a wide range of issues, including politics, which is very integral in this whole process of getting to where we want, which is legalization. So, Livi, I'm going to stop talking and tell us a little bit about your background, and we'll go from there.
Absolutely. And like I said, I've been a big fan for a long time, so I'm going to enjoy this very much. So my background is a bit unique and somewhat dramatic at times. I grew up in Mobile, Alabama, and my father was a cardiologist. My mother was an assistant district attorney for the DEA. And so I grew up very conservative, very anti-cannabis, and very much, if you will, indoctrinated into the medical system, the legal system. I was kind of a walking, talking, if you will, I guess you could say a propagandist for it in some way, but I just basically followed all of the talking points.
It's all you knew, I guess, at the time.
Thought about it. Exactly, it's all I knew. And then as one does, one goes to college. And so I went to college and actually started being around people that I started seeing that I associated with being very smart. That was actually probably the biggest thing, because I associated people that used cannabis as being stupid. That was absolutely stupid, lazy, and burnout. I mean, I was hook, line, and sinker on that. Then I started to associate it a little bit different when I saw the honors college students, kind of chiefing away, but also scoring straight A's. And I was like, this is different. And
well, because it's unlike any other substance, right? Like alcohol or something that could really slow you down, even in your mental capacity, right? If you're trying to excel with your brain, probably not the best. So cannabis, you're probably like curious. You're like, wait, what's going on here? Why? How is this possible?
Yes. And then tried it for myself. And I did find it, dramatically different than what I had expected it to be. But I still was in no way, shape, or form ready to call this medicine, ready to really jump on that, on the wellness therapeutic train, even though it made me feel better in ways I was able to sleep, I was able to eat more, de-stress, but I still wasn't ready to call it medicine until when I was in 2011 and I was in an F5 tornado, and it lost my apartment building was condemned. My car was totaled. I was also having a really rough time going into the tornado. A friend of mine had passed away 3 weeks before that, found out the boyfriend was cheating on me, all sorts of bad things for a 20-year-old little mind. And so when the tornado hit, about 3-4 weeks later, I started having grand mal seizures. I don't have epilepsy, but they did. So what they essentially associated was that I had PTSD-induced seizures. That's just incredibly stress-induced grand mal seizures. That was the final thing that they concluded was what was the cause of it. And so they put me on Keppra. They put me in, I was in cognitive behavioral therapy, working this out, but things just kind of kept getting worse with the typical methods. And then I actually ended up going and living on a farm with I'm a bona fide horse girl. So going and living on a farm is very therapeutic for me in and of itself. But lived on a farm in Alabama with kind of a hippie lady that said, we need to fix your diet. You'll be working out by being out in the farm, but also smoke as much cannabis as you want. And I was going from having seizures every few weeks, and they were actually increasing in severity and in duration. I ended up having a static epileptic grand mal, which lasted about 10 minutes, kept going in and out of a seizure. And so they were starting to get very severe. I lost my job because I kept having seizures at the job. And so by getting on the farm, eating better, having a more holistic approach, but using cannabis as kind of the tool and the anchor, I was able to go stop having seizures actually altogether. And I've been completely seizure free since 2016, having this very holistic approach. So that's the first half of the very dramatic part. And then the second half of the very dramatic, of the dramatic part was in my mid-20s. I started having a series of more health conditions, completely unrelated to anything in the past, but it resulted in 17 hospitalizations in 15 months, 5 major abdominal surgeries, and the removal of all non-vital organs except for my spleen. And so that resulted in something called abdominal adhesions, which causes incurable, irretractable chronic pain. So I was prescribed about 90 Percocets a month. They said that I would be only increasing in this in dose.
90
at the time.
Percocets a month. I'm sorry, I have to pause you right there and let my brain process that, because you're not a big human being, and that's a lot. So how many pills was it recommended a day, and what were the milligrams? What was the strength of the Percocets?
And yes, please feel free to always interrupt me, because I can ramble on about this and go on.
I'm going to apologize every time I do it, because I feel bad, but I want to make sure that we dive into certain parts. So I appreciate you understanding that. Yeah.
Full permission to do so. So it was 3 pills a day, 10 milligrams. So 30 milligrams total a day, 90 Percocets a month. And that was also on top of Valium or clozapam in the morning. That varied back and forth. So benzodiazepines in the morning, Ambien at night. I am a person that actually I used to have, they said I had legendary insomnia, because even though I was on all these very sedating medications, they would not put me to sleep. I've actually even woken up in the middle of surgery from anesthesia. So I had, in the middle of all of this, I had a really bad car accident where I compound fractured my femur, woke up during surgery while they were setting my leg. And so that's another part of the issues.
Okay, because the first thing that I was thinking when you told me about the Valium and then the Percocets and all that combination, I was thinking they are very sedative. So my next follow-up question was going to be, I mean, were you finding yourself sleeping a lot throughout the day? I mean, but it sounds like, you had something genetically that just kind of doesn't affect you, right?
It is part of my genetics. My mother is somewhat similar, and we're 5'1", my mom's 5'2", and I'm 100 pounds, maybe 105 soaking wet. So we're not big people, but yes, this tends to be a thing, and it's been a thing. Like I said, my sleeping habits or inability to sleep has been something that's plagued me since I was very, very young. And so, yes, this did not sedate me. So much so, I was in the hospital one time. So 2 separate times I was in the hospital over a month, or about a month each. And so one of the times that I was in there, they were giving me all of this IV. So they're giving me IV Dilaudid, 3 milligrams every 3 hours. The nurses had never seen these doses before. These are incredibly high doses. Just for reference, when most people go in, they get 1 milligram of Dilaudid, maybe 1.5 to 2. The legal FDA DEA dose is 4 milligrams. That's the most you can give someone. I was getting 3 milligrams every 3 hours for weeks on end, plus Valium in the morning, plus Ambien at night, and the nurses would still come in, and I'd be wide awake and fully functional, and they were like, "How can we knock you out?" Because that was a big problem, because if I'm not sleeping, I'm not healing.
That was going to be my question. They probably kept upping the dose because they kept seeing that you weren't getting sedated, right? So they were just like, give more, let's... Wow.
Yes. And so by the 17th hospitalization, and at this point, I had been working at Morgan Stanley. So my professional background is actually in finance, and I was at Morgan Stanley as a private banker advisory, like stockbroker advisory associate. It was this kind of new program they're rolling out. And I had to resign because I was truly in and out of the hospital about every month sometime. And when I say in and out, I'm not talking about emergency visits. I've lost track of how many of those were. I'm talking about hospital admissions at least one night in the hospital, if not multiple nights. Right. And so that was 15 of those right in succession, because I kept having complications and problems with surgeries that kept piling on top of each other. And so by the 17th hospitalization, I'd been in for a month. Something snapped, and I really wanted to get out, and I wanted this to end. And there were also people saying that I would be dead by 30. I was 26 at the time and pretty much declared an invalid. They were saying, this is your life. Like you're kind of done. And so when I got out, and I need to preface this, I don't recommend this to anyone. What I'm about to say, do not recommend this, but I had snapped. And so I went and got an ounce of flour and a whiteboard. And I said, I'm getting off the Dilaudid at least, because they had me on Dilaudid and Percocets when I got out. And I said, I'm getting off of this, and I'm getting off of it as fast as possible. And so I put myself into really serious withdrawals by myself. And my seizure had come back. So again, this was highly none of my doctors, every doctor advised against this, but I was sick of it. And so put myself into withdrawals and got myself off of the Dilaudid in 10 days with cannabis, and then got down to the Percocets, to where I was taking about half a pill every few days. And that was just to manage essentially breakthrough pain. And I was scared of pain. That's another really big thing I want to emphasize, is I was absolutely terrified of these pain spasms that come on really fast. They're very painful and they're quite debilitating. And so I thought that opiates would help with the prophylactic, basically, but it ended up just making it worse. And so since 2019, I'm off of all major pharmaceuticals. I am on 2 right now just for hormone replacement therapy, because I had a radical hysterectomy. So I have to be on hormone replacement therapy so I can stay young. But I am off of all other pharmaceuticals, including the benzos, just on a daily regimen of cannabis, a decent diet. You'll pretty much always see me with a coconut water. Always in my hand.
I love coconut water.
It is life. And so with that, I not only wasn't an invalid anymore, but by 2019, I was actually ranked 5th in the country in my division in 3-day eventing, which is the triathlon of equestrian sports. And so it's pretty intense.
Oh my gosh. Look at that. That's amazing.
Told you I'm a bona fide horse girl. So did that. And I also made it back to Wall Street. I worked, I ran IR for John McAfee. Yes, that John McAfee.
McAfee. Mr. Yes. Belize, right?
Yes, Mr. Belize. I ran IR for him, and or I should say for the company that he was coming back on, that did MGT Capital. They were doing cybersecurity as well as Bitcoin mining. So I did that for a few years, and then ended up working for Larry McDonald, who he wrote the book, The Colossal Failure of Common Sense, the Lehman Brothers collapse, and now is the Bear Traps report. So does new macro institutional research. And so he mentored me, worked with me for a while, and then I got to CB1 Capital with Todd Harrison. Was there for about a year before I met Tulsi Gabbard, and that crazy woman, who I love very much. She's definitely awesome. She is awesome, and she changed my life in the sense that she just radically inspired me. That's the best way to put it. Is I wasn't a fan until I actually met her, and then I met her, and she's just a really incredible woman. What they say about her is actually true. I mean, she's pure integrity. And so she really inspired me to do, I knew I had a story, right? That's a story. I know that that's a pretty compelling story, but I did want to have more than a story. And that's just frank and honest, because there are some really incredible stories out there besides mine. There's actually a lot of stories out there that are phenomenal. People getting off 19 medications after dozens of surgeries, see even more dramatic health turnarounds even than mine. And so I knew we needed more than a story. We needed a solution. We needed a solution to the problem of moving the needle forward actually understanding, framing the conversation in a way that's representative of the majority of the people that use cannabis, what cannabis is actually about, but really what it means to the people that use it, to the majority of people that use it. And then how do we get the right products to the right people consistently and on a regular basis and with ease. And so that was the mission, the goal, if you will. And that was 5 years ago. And now we're finally actually at that point where I believe we've developed at least one solution to getting that through. And also we're now actively trying to help kind of reshape the narrative a little bit from this bifurcation of either extreme medical or extreme or vice, essentially, into the umbrella of wellness, that people get well from using cannabis. And that's my story, because I'm no longer sick. I do not have seizures any longer. I am not battling any of the hospitalizations. Actually, last year was my first year that I did not have to call an EMS or have any kind of IV fluids in almost 10 years. So I am on the up. Thank you.
Yes.
So I'm on the major up and up as far as getting well. And I think that's the narrative. It's because it's not something we have to contrive. It's not something we have to make up. It's something we have to just simply tell.
Just tell.
And I think that's just tell.
You're so right. And I want to just quickly go back. You're like, the fact that you had the initiative, and I know you're not recommending this to anybody, but like, you decided to go through those withdrawals and to really wean off of the dependency of those opioids, which they just take a hold of you. I mean, chemically, they're engineered to make you addicted to them, right? So it's like it's a big uphill battle. So I commend you for that, first and foremost. And so it sounds like what you were doing is, as you were weaning off, you were simply replacing cannabis with, like, once you felt a certain like pain or any type of situation where you needed relief. Is that kind of how it worked? And you slowly started seeing better results that way?
That was it. It started to see better results. And I'll be honest with it, that I'm a big believer in plant medicines all around. And so, yes, I did use psilocybin to also help remember what I said, I was very afraid of the pain. And so it actually just took one psilocybin session for me to confront that fear and to say that I can actually handle the pain, and cannabis will be the tool that will help me manage it. And once I had that mindset shift, oh man, everything did change.
It opened, everything opened up.
And everything opened up. And I have to say, one other person gets a lot of credit for this. It is my husband. My husband, when we met, I was still in the thick of it, very, very, very sick. We were actually in Thailand. I had to be hospitalized in Thailand. We almost had to have a plane diverted. I had to be seen in and given IV fluids in Dubai. So, we had some pretty scary situations when we first actually got together. And he looked at me and said, because someone actually told him, this is really harsh, but someone told him, said, he's a losing trade. She is going to be dead by 30. You need to cut her. And he was, Wall Street. Okay. We both come from Wall Street. Yes. Yeah. But it was said, and it made him, it lit a fire under him. And so he came to me in the most loving way and he said, "You're not sick." And at the time I said, "No, I have all of these problems. I have this litany of prescriptions, these litany of illnesses." And he says, "No," he goes, "You're not sick." He said, "You're on poison." And he said, "You eat terribly. And we're going to work on this little bit by little bit." And he had the patience of saints, but he truly really. And so he helped. It was a 3-year journey, but he really, really helped me to get off of them. And also, just like I said, little bit by little bit, doing with, so I was riding the horses. So that was exercise, right? Because I'm a competitive rider. So the type of riding I do is intense. And then a better diet always. And then using cannabis as the prophylactic tool essentially, and also to help with breakthrough pain. And yeah, using that and having the mindset and believing that it can work is what really started to shift everything.
It's incredible. And another thing you touched on is that the narrative that really, it sticks to me every day in terms of like when I'm on X or on social media and I'm looking at just the industry as a whole and what we're pushing for. We're all, saying the same thing, which is we're talking about the benefits, we're talking about the contradictions, we're talking about the hypocrisy at the federal level, because it's still not recognized legally. But the opportunity, I think, is the storytelling of the people that are really benefiting in wellness and everyday life. And I go back to one post that I've shared, and I know a number of people have shared in the past, and it's that video of I believe his name was Larry Silverman. He was a former police officer. He's got the gray hair, and he suffered from epilepsy, right? And so he just had no motor function or any ability to control his movements or his hands or anything, and he is just kind of had jolty movements, and they put a tincture of THC under his mouth. And I remember I just sped up the video and just kind of showed, one after the other, 1 minute, he just gradually gets better. And even his talking ability is like more clear. And he even expresses at the end of the video that he has an appetite, like he's hungry, he wants to eat. And it's kind of a funny, humorous moment where everybody's like, oh, that's the munchies. But, those types of videos, I think, are like, there's really no combating it. And the last thing I'll say, I know I'm kind of ranting here, but like what we're up against is like really, really an old playbook when it comes to the opposition and the prohibition. Like all they really got at this point is kids and the safety of kids, which no one in the legal industry is advocating for children to consume cannabis, right? And I think the standards are being trying to be met where, hey, kids can't even get into this product. Like they're trying to make it more child safe, the packaging. So my point is like the opposition's narrative is not really strong, right? And the proof is in the pudding with these testimonials. And I think just the more we share that visually, there's a huge opportunity that, I mean, it's all about getting the word out right now, and censorship's not really an issue with this new administration. So let's push. Let's show
Exactly.
let's show this.
And I want to say that to the prohibitionist, we can take away the ammunition that they still use, which is that we don't need another intoxicant. And that's why I'm very, very much a proponent of saying, let's start using the term wellness, because we can have wellness and medical. Those are actually two different things. Right. Wellness and medical are two very different things. And because when we look at adult use recreational, what that is saying is that is a vice that is in moderation, and that, any amount of it is harmful to you, which is why you need to have it at a minimum, bare minimum and extreme moderation. That's what we say when we're classifying something as a intoxicating vice. But when we talk about it in terms of wellness, and it's actually far more in line with how consumers use cannabis, it's very much we're trying to, people are trying to relax, they're trying to socialize a little bit better, they are trying to enhance their mood, they're trying to get better sleep, less pain. These are the vast majority of reasons that the term recreational or adult use just doesn't capture. It doesn't represent it correctly, and it actually puts it in a harmful framing where it needs to have a syntax. Whereas I say that cannabis is only a vice if you're misusing it or abusing it, which no one in the industry should be advocating for. Right. Now, what this will entail, though, is that we have to abandon, as the majority, as the mainstream industry, we have to abandon stoner culture. I know that that's a very hot and heavy topic, because it's saying that it's disrespectful, and it's saying, no, it's still going to always exist, but it's a counterculture by design. It's
Right.
not meant to be mainstream.
There's negative connotation to it, regardless if you find it humorous or you embrace that. But the connotation's there, you know.
The connotation will always be, because the connotation will always be considered juvenile. And as long as you
Yeah.
keep that connotation, they will say you're trying to go after my kids, because only kids would be interested in this kind of marketing.
Right. And look at the alcohol industry, right? I mean, you see that their level of advertising and marketing, like even at the lowest level, like with beer, right? You got like Ultra showing fitness and health, right? After people are playing pickleball or playing tennis, they're cracking open a beer and laughing with each other in the sun. Or you've got, the hard, rugged cowboy that works hard and he's on the farm and he drinks a Bud Light, right? Like
Yep.
there's no negative connotation with alcohol in that industry, and I think you're right. I think it's an opportunity for the industry to really grow up, like mature. You know what I mean? Like let's start legitimizing the perception so that when we are face to face talking with these lawmakers or whoever it is, there's nothing to kind of there's no way to get around or argue different, right? Like you're looking at this person, they're legitimate, they're credible, and they have a lot of data to back up. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, another thing that excites me is like Gen Z, right? I mean, I know Gen Z gets a lot of like rap, but one thing that I'm seeing in the data and what I see on being posted or articles being written is that they are shifting from less alcohol to more cannabis consumption. These younger adults. And
Right.
that's going to be an interesting like world like once kind of everything evens out when these generations get older because we're going to live in a time where if cannabis is the preferred consumption method, the mood, the atmosphere, the environment of places could change, the behavior of people could change, the health of people could change, right? Because I mean, I know my generation as millennials, we're just conditioned with alcohol is there, and and I enjoy a drink or two, but I mean, the way we used to drink, I used to drink when I was younger. It's just crazy to think about now, So I see
Yeah.
that maybe changing.
I think it is changing. It's also the Gen Zs. They're far more health conscious, especially at their age than we were as millennials. They are, they know what Red 40 is, and they know what Red 40 is going to do to them. They,
We just learned about that, yeah, and I'm glad we are learning
yeah,
about it. But go ahead, sorry.
we're just throwing back Sour Patch Kids like it was going out of style. We had no problem with it. Whereas they're starting to wisen up about what they eat, what they consume, and they're putting it together that it actually affects how they feel. So alcohol can absolutely affect especially doing it daily is likely to have serious negative effects on you. Whereas if you're using cannabis, and I'm not even talking about just THC, I'm talking, the type 1. We can even talk about type 2, which is CBD to THC, the ratio of 1-to-1. That's a very popular, we're seeing that a lot in the beverages, that's a really popular blend because it still gets people mellowed, but the CBD kind of moderates the THC. It modulates the THC, so you don't have quite the psychoactivity with it. I mean, we still are getting buzzed, but it only takes
Right.
half a drink. So it's cheaper all around because they're not having to drink. They're not wanting to put back 4 or 5. They tell me they're like 1 can, 125 milligram 1-to-1 is good, and they're happy. And these are guys straight out of college that are used to drinking, what college kids can put down, which astonishes me, which I'm sure astonishes you. We're like, how did we ever do that?
Exactly. Yeah, that's
How
what I
did I?
reflect on. It's like, dang, okay.
But they're noticing, and this is what's amazing. They're turning to cannabis to get off of it, to curb withdrawals. They're using CBD to curb withdrawals. They're like I said, they're so much more health conscious, and they don't want to take pills. That's another big thing. Gen Z, they don't like the pills. They don't want to. I've talked to many of them. It's very interesting where they're like, we won't touch, even if they get prescribed an opioid for a surgery or something. They may take it in the hospital, but they won't take it when they're out. They'll just eat
Wow.
gummies, basically. So it's It's a whole new thing. And then what's also fascinating, though, is the older generation, because I'm in North Carolina, so we don't have a medical or rec program, but we have hemp. We're going to put that in quotation marks.
Well, that's where Texas, same thing. We have a
Same
hemp
thing.
industry here. Yeah.
Exactly. But what's fascinating is when I talk to these operators, the ones that are, and I'm not talking about the guy that's selling it at a gas station or at like a vape, head shop kind of thing. I'm talking about the one that is exclusively selling cannabis, hemp products basically as a dispensary. And there, we've got a few of those even here in Wilmington, and we're a tiny little town.
Like not licensed, you mean? Just kind of like doing it out of their house?
No. They're licensed.
Oh,
They're a
okay.
licensed operation, and they're fully legitimate. But they're just what I'm saying is they're not selling any other product but the hemp products. I'm not as opposed to a head shop that's selling tobacco products and also has
pipes and all kinds of stuff. And okay, got you.
Right. So just a pure, like you walk into it and it's essentially just like walking into a dispensary in a legal state. That's how the setup is. So when we talk to them, they say vast majority of their customers are 40 and up, with a shocking amount of 70-year-olds, 75 and up year olds. And they're shocked at how popular flower is. Flower is still the most popular, even amongst the older generations, but they love the drinks. They do love the drinks, but they also like to have the variety of type 1, type 2, type 3. And so I think that what's going on in hemp is really fascinating. Like there's so much opportunity here if we can look at it less in the regulatory capture model. I know that's taboo to say, but if we can look at it as kind of a potential opportunity, I don't want to see it shut personally. I don't want to see it shut down. I want to see it codify. I mean, because if we actually get real, we can go, cannabis is legal, guys. Right. If we can actually just get the testing standards around it, get the regulations around it, get people licensed, kind of elevate it and legitimize it, these operators would gladly do it. Gladly. We're already helping them improve their SOPs, improve their testing standards, improve their regulations, and their packaging and all of that. We're already helping them do all of this because they're like, we would love to just to be here and continue to serve the clients that we're serving, and they're not serving kids. That's one of the biggest misconceptions, because it's expensive product, and the kids have their plugs from the college campuses. Right. It's the older generations that, number one, have the money to spend, and number two, they care about something like it being tested. They care about it that it's legal. They care about that access. And these retailers, they're just as annoyed with the COA problem, like the COA shopping and them not being lit. They're just as annoyed as anyone else. And so we're trying to come in and help kind of guide this and lift up who would like to be lifted up, because I do think that they're performing a much, much, much needed function in the market, for someone like me who does need it, and I'm able, and now that I'm able to have access to things like gummies and type 1, type 2, type 3 and all of that, it is a game changer. And if we get it shut down, who knows how long it is until we get, a program, especially in Southern state.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and we know it, as history has shown, prohibition really doesn't work, right? Because the people will find a way. And that invites bad actors and criminal activity as well. So, but it's interesting to hear you talk about the perspective there, because like this industry is so fascinating, right? You've got THC legal market with 24 states operating. Then you've got like the whole nation is able to grow hemp due to the Farm Bill, and the states that are prohibitive, like Texas, it's just so different everywhere. And so like when you're talking, I'm thinking like the way it is in Texas is it's very mature in terms of like the understanding of products by the consumers. I mean, Texas is a large state, so I get
Right.
that. But like, there's the education factor that they get. There's the quality level. Like these operators are on point, and they're like legitimate in their processes and their SOPs. But the problem is like the local government is just fighting them and is making it super hard not to thrive. So it's just kind of like it's different problems everywhere. Um, and it's just so dispersed, right? The fact that we separate the two, hemp and cannabis, because we have to legally, is a barrier right there in itself when it comes to like education and understanding around the efficacy and even the difference of everything.
Agreed. And we're also, you know, the quote unquote waste from the cannabis market is hemp, which can be, and which can be converted for industrial use. This is what's incredible about it. The fiber and the stalks are the same for a cannabis plant as they are a hemp plant. This is the same plant, people, and that's. I think that we do need a federal bill. I know this is hot water but something I want to look at, like the States' Rights or the States Reform Act by Nancy Mace.
Yes.
That's the Republican bill but there's something I want to point out. As much as a fan as I am of that bill for a lot of reasons, I think that there's a reason that a lot of politicians don't jump on it.
Why?
To back it. Because it's framing it as alcohol and tobacco. And that's just not politically palpable.
Because it removes it from the Controlled Substances Act. It deschedules.
It does, but it still puts it under the purview. It would put it under the purview of the ATF. So it would be regulated just like alcohol and tobacco and firearms, which means it's also subject potentially to a sin tax. Now it does only regulate, there would be a 3% excise tax, but you can still put that on there if you wanted to. But the other issue that I think that you have around that, while it can make sense, I just don't know. I don't know in this political environment, when you have MAHA and and this whole movement of getting healthy, how framing a new vice on the scene. Don't worry, it's a less healthy vice, but we're alcohol and tobacco 2.0. I don't know how you're going to win over the public with that message, because you're basically saying, hey, because you're saying, yes, this is alcohol and tobacco, because it's going to get regulated like alcohol and tobacco. So people are immediately going to put in their minds that alcohol and tobacco are going to be highly invested in basically controlling it. And it's going to be alcohol and tobacco 2.0. And so then it's going to elicit that negative connotation of these industries have a history of lying to us. They have a history of putting profits over people. They have a history of misrepresenting claims. They have a history of misrepresenting health claims specifically. And so I think that you're kind of putting yourself up actually for a losing battle, because you're going to have not just prohibitionists fight you, you're going to have inside industry fight you, because they're going to say, don't put us with this, don't anchor us to this messaging. And so I think that as much as I think that we're on the right track with states reform, and I'm a big fan of Nancy Mace, love that she champions us, but I think that we need to go a little bit further and put the people first. Put the people first in the mind of the legislation. And if we do that, actually, I think what you have to do is you have to reframe cannabis. You have to redefine what cannabis is based on its scientific understanding. It comes from Cannabis L sativa. It's all the same plant. There's type 1, type 2, type 3. That is based on the cannabinoids, the ratio of the cannabinoids of THC to CBD. This does cover essentially psychoactivity to non-psychoactivity. You can regulate and even add restrictions according to those types. You can put in this regulation that states could opt out for the wellness use if they wanted to, but good luck. Again, if you're framing it as wellness, you have so much difference. And then you say, but you can't take away medical. You have to have access for medical. And this is a wellness framing. And what you're paving the way for is actually a regulatory framework for a nutraceutical market that currently doesn't exist. the nutraceutical market of plant-based medicines and supplements and so forth is a multi-trillion-dollar market that has virtually no regulations because the FDA doesn't know how to regulate it. And that's because of the FDA framework of single receptor modality, essentially. They look at how one molecule acts with one receptor in the body, and that's how they evaluate medicines. And so with plants, which are multi-agent pharmacology, multi-agents acting on multiple receptors, the framework that the FDA have is just inefficient. It's inadequate to actually be able to evaluate plants in this way, in a sufficient way. And so if we frame cannabis as the linchpin, so to speak, of nutraceuticals, of plant-based medicines, we can actually introduce a complementary framework. I'm not talking about replacing it, but a complementary framework for the FDA to evaluate plant-based medicines and nutraceuticals. And we can have that in-between full wellness market when we're checking bioavailability, we're checking doses, we're checking how this works in with people. And the cannabis industry, for as much as we've groaned about the regulations with seed to sale tracking and with COA testing and all of that, imagine if we apply this into the plant-based world, in the plant-based medicine world, where we can actually evaluate it and we can actually get people to the medicines that they're looking for. We're talking about an entirely different healthcare paradigm in this country, and maybe even the world. And I'm like, that's the story that cannabis has to offer. I think that is so much more inspiring, so much more exciting than framing it as new alcohol and tobacco and let's regulate it as such.
You just blew my mind. Okay, so because when you first were talking about how ATF would regulate, and before you got into like the solution, I had so many questions. Like, okay, well, this is have to be a whole new category. Like, how, so you explained all of it. So thank you for articulating it so well. This is very helpful. I think that is very exciting, and I had never thought of it that way. So let's dive into that. So first off, I am hopeful. I want to say first, after hearing all that, and the reason why is because you have a new cabinet, a new administration coming in that is open to these types of ideas, right?
Yes.
Before, in any other administration before, I'd be like, good luck, Livy. Okay, yeah, like you have to have the understanding. You got to have the person or the team just explain it, which we have. But then you'd have to have, over there on Capitol Hill, those guys understanding and then implementing this law. But now those guys are in. So there is hope. So,
yes.
Okay. And my next question is, when you talk about like how this would open up for plant-based medicine and nutraceuticals specifically outside of like anything that's ever been done, that could even, cannabis being the linchpin, but then that would open up the door to like, say, psychedelics, right? Or ibogaine treatment or I mean, all this different stuff that is seeing results in terms of rewiring the brain and helping curb addictions.
Now you're talking. Now we're talking real solutions to real problems, and not just talking about what could we do? Oh, plants are great. No. This is the way forward of paving it forward. And I mean, and I just look at the people in cannabis. I know you're tired. I know you are burnt out. I know you have lost. Some of you have lost millions, some of you have lost billions, and I have had my fair share of pain with you, I promise you. But if we can just remember what this is actually about, it's about the people, and the plant is the tool, and what the opportunity is here. We're talking about not just generational wealth. I mean, we're talking about completely
generational health.
Yes. Fixing what went wrong in the past, and so that our grandchildren are not riddled with cysts and with I can't have children. Actually, that's another big part of this is I can't have children because of all of my health issues. And I'm not going to sit here and blame anyone. That's not what I'm about to do. But what I am going to say is what if this didn't have to happen? What if we had other alternatives? What if there was a different way of thinking? What if we actually interwove, yes, mental health with physical health, with spiritual health, like having these things intertwined, not being woo, but actually understanding the foundation of it in our society, in our health, in our own health. And I think that this just could have such profound impact on the very problem that we all know exists. We've all had a touch or a brush with it at some point, that the system that we have is inadequate. It's not saying that pharmaceuticals don't have their place. Like, I always kind of joke around with people. I say, look, if I'm on my horse and I fall off and my bone's sticking out of my leg, do not rub CBD cream on it. Give me the opioids.
Right,
Give me the morphine.
Yeah.
But that's
but to manage and for it to be the go-to in kind of a lot of different aspects, rather than understanding the individual, the genetics, the intake of the diet, of like factoring everything in rather than blanket prescription, I think is a better alternative.
Yes, and there's a hunger for that too, even among the doctors. The doctors are wanting more integrative medicine, and there's this frustration and this friction a lot of times between what doctors want to tell people and then what the patients actually will do. And a lot of times it just comes down to patients need better solutions. They don't necessarily need all the more education. A lot of times they just need better solutions, better access, better ways to better quality things. And so that carries over into our approach in the industry and what we're doing. We are kind of turning a particular narrative a little bit on its head, which is, yes, look, I'm not against consumer education, but the consumers have been educated to death. And the consumers, many of them, don't want to be educated. And that's okay. They don't have to be. Do most consumers know that how Tylenol works? Or how Tylenol, do they know the biochemistry behind that? Absolutely not.
We're laughing, but listen, to the benefit of the industry, with the communication, it's like they've been in a position where they have to, because they've had to dispel a lot of the misinformation and lies that have been out there. So, we've had to dig deep. We've had to go to the CB1 receptor, CB2 receptor, talk about how it's married with our biological system. I'm with it. But I think you're right. I think there's something to say about, in some cases, and in most cases, I'd say less is more, right? So the plant speaks for itself.
Yes.
If that's what the person is looking for.
And I'm not, please, I'm not trying to do a shameless plug here of my company, but it is on point of what we're talking about, and why we've created this solution to actually this exact problem that we're talking about. And so the narrative that we've kind of adopted is, the consumers don't need more education, they need better solutions. And so what we developed was using science. So using all the science, we took it as our responsibility to understand the science to the most infinite degree that we possibly could, and then break it down so easy that a 5-year-old could understand it, right? And that's why we did it in colors and symbols. And so essentially what we did is we're able to, using the COAs and using the different chemical analysis, we're able to correctly and objectively identify and classify the plants and the products, the flower and all products, basically. And we're able to classify it into mind-body balanced. So those are the top 3 groups, and then you have 4 subgroups that we color coded to correlate with the top reported effects that go with those groups, and that ranges from energizing to focus to calming to rest. Now, and why we color coded it, but we put more emphasis on the color. The platform's called Discover Your Color, and the reason that we did that is because, as anyone in the industry knows, everyone has a different effect, or a lot of people have different effects. So what we found, and this is with using roughly 30,000 reports, this is over 10 years of research, that we found roughly 2/3 of the people will share the same effect. So yellow will make most people, 2/3 of the people, energetic and creative. Now, the other third will have a different effect. It doesn't necessarily mean the opposite effect, but it can be. So if you happen to be a person that makes you, that you're looking to use cannabis to make you sleepy, okay, and yellow happens to make you sleepy, the underlying chemistry that makes up the category of yellow never changes. So you've just found the chemistry that works for you, which means you can reliably go back to yellows to make you sleepy every time. Does that make sense?
It does. I guess just to clarify though, so like if someone takes the yellow that's supposed to make you sleepy and then they don't get sleepy, do they know that that just doesn't work for them and they can move on?
Correct. So that's
And
exactly.
vice versa and opposite, right? Like if they know it works, it's always going to be reliable because their genetic makeup corresponds with the cannabinoids and molecules within that product or whatever. Yeah.
Yes, it becomes a very honest conversation. So, like, just to put it in, like, for instance, a customer walks into a dispensary. They say, "I'm looking for something to make me sleep." The bud tender will say, "Great, we're going to start you off in the purple category. It's the most likely to make you sleep. If it doesn't, we'll work you down the spectrum. Then we'll next start with the blue, then we'll go to the green, and then we'll go to the yellow. And we'll discover your color. Once you find that color that delivers that effect, you're done searching." So it makes it far less, hey, let's just trial and error and figure it out. It gives it a systematic approach to finding the right product category for the exact effect that you're looking for.
And it seems very fluid too in terms of like easy to understand because in today's kind of situation it's like, hey, this is an indica, this is a sativa, this strain, Afghan Kush is more of a sedated, and you have to remember these like strain names and these, whereas if the color coding kind of makes sense where you could just say, red was good, purple was great.
Exactly. And here's the other thing, though, about strain names and the strain names in indica sativa. So indica sativa, you've got a 2/3 chance of getting the opposite effect than what's actually labeled. So it's a terrible labeling system, terrible classification system. The other big problem is, this is why strain names are highly problematic, is because you can have the same cultivator, the same genetics, the same cultivation, and so the same strain name, and from one harvest to the next, a completely different chemical profile. So it'll have a completely different effect. And so the consumer goes, wait, I really liked Tangy Skittles last year, the last 3 months I've been buying it. I don't like it anymore. And then, so they stop buying it because the effect's different. And then the retailer goes, wait, Tangy Skittles sold great in, Q1. Why is it bombing in Q2? And they don't understand. They don't see that the chemistry has changed, which has changed the consumer's effects. And so what the colors do is the colors actually visibly show you that change.
How does the chemistry change? So first off, that's me. I'm that guy that like, because the legal states that I go to, I'll purchase flower while I'm there, and I'll come back, another time, and I'll try to get the same one, and I don't like it as much. So
Yes.
how does the chemistry change? Is it the environment? Is it everything, the weather,
It can be, okay, so think about it. The best way to think about it is, it's the genetic expression. So think about, you can have 5 kids, right, from the same 2 parents. So same genetics, but they're growing up in different times and in different environments. So you have different genetic expressions. So what genes get turned on versus what genes don't get turned on. Just like in humans, same things happen in the plants. So the slight, and it is so difficult. It's incredibly difficult, actually, to be able to harvest consistently from one to the next, because it's not as difficult with cannabinoids because they're actually molecularly in size. They're bigger than terpenes. Terpenes are smaller and they're much more volatile. So it can be the slightest tweak that you might not even be aware of, and it's going to affect the expression, and it'll affect the chemical profile. And that's why we don't pay that much attention to strain names. We don't pay that much attention to genetics. We don't pay that much attention. We do pay attention to cultivators, because your master cultivators have a much higher percentage of consistency, whereas your lower tier cultivators, they either just turn out purples. Basically, they'll turn out just one color, and a lot of it is in purples and blue, just heavily hybridization and and not a lot of expression. Or they're all over the place and there's just no consistency. So it does highlight who actually knows what they're doing, as opposed to who's just throwing the seeds in the ground and trying to get as much yield as possible.
Yeah, I get the cultivator, but like, do you guys also like track the ratio of cannabinoids within said strain?
Yes.
Or okay, so like, this percentage of CBD versus THC versus THCA versus like blah, 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 right? Okay, and that's
You
kind
just
of
said
how you narrow it. Okay.
you said the magic word, ratio. That's the magic word. So the big problem with terpenes, when most people look at terpenes, they think 1 + 1 = 2. Not the case. When we're looking at terpenes, not all terpenes are created equally. You're dealing with the three-dimensional plant here, in the sense that some terpenes, like beta-caryophyllene, for example, you'll see that in a very significant weight in most chemovars. And the reason for that is because beta-caryophyllene is actually quite heavy. It actually acts as a cannabinoid, and it's much bigger in molecular weight. But it doesn't have that much of an effect, and it's certainly, because it's across all the cultivars, it doesn't distinguish any. We've been able to identify not only what terpenes are significant, but the ratios of the terpenes to cannabinoids that are significant when it comes to the actual classifications. And so that's what our platform does, is it's able, it's got the algorithm that essentially sorts that and color codes operators' inventories, whether that's a brand or a retailer. And so they're able to see right off the bat what their color variation, what their color distribution is. I will say most people are heavily overweight, again, in purples and blues. And this is what's really cool. What we found, and this started out in our pilot, but our pilot found that they were overweight, but they found their yellows and greens outsold the blues and purples 2-1. And so then they started to go on the search for yellows and greens, and you had a lot of cultivators that were excited because they finally were able, it was like their time to shine. They're like, we've got purples and, we've got yellows and greens, and we've been trying to get people excited about this. And now we, get in on this. And so we were able to connect them, and the revenue increased 12.5%. Over 6 months, when their other competition was decreasing in their revenue. They're in a really hot spot in San Francisco. So it's Floor Dispensary. If anyone's in San Francisco, go see Floor. They're amazing. And they've got the whole color system. Bohemian Chemist is another one in California. And these are two that when they evened out, they have the problem of keeping enough flower in. That's what Bohemian Chemist was like. We need to make sure that we can continue this. And so it shows, just when you have that even amount of distribution and you actually care about what your inventory looks like based on the chemical level, you're able to reach more people. And this is the other fascinating part. The 90% of the consumers, 90% of consumers, when they found the color that was right for them, they didn't change. They became so loyal to that color.
Yeah. I mean, that's what the consumer wants. And it sounds like kind of that's the challenge in the industry overall, is that it's difficult to keep that consistency. I mean, I would imagine the best growing method would probably be indoor in terms of like trying to stabilize the environment. But even then, it sounds like there's variation and change.
Yep.
So
and you're sacrificing other things that you can get outdoors. So that's what makes this so amazing. And what I love about our system is it does dive into all of the nuances of all of this. And this is, we've just gotten started. We're going to continue to dive in, continue to dial in on what the plant, the different varieties of the plant, the different type, what actually contributes to potency, what actually contributes to intensity of the effect, not just the potency, but the how intense is it going to be, these types of things. I mean, I guess you could say it's potency, but the quality is the other factor. And how do you determine quality? You actually can, if you know what you're looking for, you can get some more objective measures of quality. And so I think that over the next 2 to 5 years, the industry is going to get a lot more mature. I'm very excited. I was bearish the last 4 years, and now talking to me, you can probably understand why. I'm incredibly bullish now because I do think that we have this for exactly the reasons you said. We've got the right administration in where we can start to really make, real headway if we just remember what's important, like what's truly important,
people,
and everything else. Yes. And I promise you, Wall Street, I promise you, MSOs, I promise you, everybody, everything falls into place after that. We will make so much more money if you put the people first because it unleashes the plant. And then we're talking about 10 different verticals at least with the plant as a base ingredient. Okay. I mean, so you want to talk about investment possibilities. I mean, these things are truly endless at this moment because we don't even know all of the different ways that this could come together. And then again, you've got an inspiring message rather than something that you're trying to push on people. You're actually lifting people up. I mean, it's our time. It's our moment. If we just recognize it, if we just see it, it's going to be incredible. We're going to have to kind of shrug off the last 10 years that have sucked. They have. And some egos are going to have to be set aside. We got some plays wrong. We got some things wrong. Okay, that happens.
That's part of it.
That's part of it. But we've got something real now. Real. And we've got the data. We've got the momentum. We've got something so special here, and I feel it, and I think I don't think we've ever had a better opportunity. Truly,
I gotta tell you, I just appreciate this conversation because I just feel re-energized after coming out of it. I mean, you've helped me kind of look at this from a different lens because I think we've been stuck in the same kind of mode, in the same narrative, in the same vantage point for so long, and it's time for a shift. It seems like everything's falling into place like you're saying, so I'm very hopeful. The added bonus is that you do know Tulsi Gabbard, so you can kind of bend her ear a little bit and talk to her about some of these ideas that you're talking. I know she's going to be leading.
She's got a big job right now, but
yeah. But hey, she knows the other friendlies in the cannabis industry that are senators and congresswomen and men. So Livi, this was a pleasure. I really appreciate you accepting my invite to come on. You're exactly what the industry needs in terms of fresh ideas and leadership, and just that, that adversity to keep forward. So appreciate your whole journey and you just being who you are.
Thank you. You're too kind. This was really fun. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Let's do it again real soon, okay? And
for sure.
Thanks everybody for listening. Bye.
Cannabinoid Connect, the nation's most diverse cannabis-related podcast.